Hello to all the listeners of my podcast. Thank you for joining in today. We have a very, very special guest today. He's my roommate from college from the U.S., Mr. Will Catherine.
How's it going?
Good. How are you doing, bro?
I'm doing fantastic.
Great to have you on. Today's topic might be a little bit controversial. We're going to talk about the protests that are happening in Serbia right now. Will, why don't you introduce yourself a little bit and say what your connection with Serbia has been over the years?
Sure. So yeah, my first 18 or so years of my life, absolutely. I mean, maybe knew that there was a country of Serbia, but other than that, had absolutely no connection with it. And then, randomly stumbled across you my freshman year of college, and from there we became good friends. And now, this time here in Serbia, as we're talking, this is my fourth time coming here, and I've seen a few places in Serbia, met a lot of Serbians, practice the language now, so I have a strong connection over the last 4 years.
This is your fourth year in a row, which means every summer you didn't go on like summer vacations to Italy, Spain, Florida, whatever. You came to Serbia, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Serbia is my summer vacation.
Yes, good to hear.
Dream destination.
Dream destination. One more thing. You started learning the language when?
February of this year.
And it's July as we're speaking.
Yes.
How do you think your level has gone to so far in these 5 months?
I think I made good progress for the 5 months, but in terms of being able to use it in a variety of situations, without worrying, there's a lot more work to be done because, any language is a long journey, but I think, I've made good progress to start.
Do you, can you read?
Yeah, I can read. I read the newspaper and some books and stuff. There's, again, like, my reading level's not, I can't go read a novel or something, but I can read stuff for sure.
Cyrillic and Latin characters?
Yes, both. Latin's a little easier, but, I prefer the Cyrillic, and
you text me on WhatsApp in Serbian in Cyrillic.
Yes, you got it. You got to support the official language, the official
characters.
Alphabet.
Yeah, right. Okay. Okay. You talked a little bit about you coming here. We'll get more into that later on. Why don't you talk to us? So, protest started last Tuesday. Today is Wednesday, so 8 days ago.
Yes.
I've personally been to, I think, 5 protests. We went together to 2.
Mm-hmm.
You skipped on a few. And why don't you tell us about... We both skipped the first day because we had no idea it was happening. Then we went to the second day, last Wednesday. And why don't you tell us what you were expecting? As we all know, there's currently protests. Well, I'm not sure. Are the protests in the U.S. still going on?
I think for the most part they've stopped.
They've stopped.
There might be a few small things in certain cities, but overall they've stopped.
Seattle is still...
With the autonomous zone?
Right.
I think that still exists, yeah.
Okay, so...
yeah, the mainstream coverage has shifted back to coronavirus.
But you are kind of foreign to protests, right? When they were happening in the U.S., you watched it on TV, but you didn't actually go to any.
Yes, I did not participate. I live across the street from the mayor of the city where I'm from, so there was a little
What
bit... What
city are you from?
Milwaukee, Wisconsin, in the Midwest. So I saw some of the protesting, but I did not participate in them myself.
But you protested in Belgrade, Serbia. Why is that? Why didn't you protest in the U.S.?
I maybe don't necessarily align with all the aims of the protests in the U.S. There's a lot of looting and other things associated. Of course, there's peaceful protesters as well, but there's a lot of looting and stuff associated with it. So I felt like it was best to stay out. But in my 4 years here, I've talked with countless amount of different people who have talked about Vučić and all the terrible things he's done. So I'm very much willing to go out and protest against him because I see how it affects the people that I've met here on a daily basis.
Right. So you met a lot of my friends. Of most of my friends, I know a handful of people that actually went to the protest. Why do you think that's the case?
I think, if you talk to anyone, they would say, oh, I don't like Vucic or whatever, but, I mean, roughly your friends or whatever, people in Belgrade. But it's another level to actually, take time out of your day to come protest and to be really passionate about, the issues. It's people can say, oh, I care about this, I care about that, but then when it comes to actually, putting in the effort, changing their
So they're just
routines,
lazy.
I mean, I think that's a part of it. Yeah, maybe there's some pessimism in terms of the importance or the being able to actually affect
Change something.
affect change. But
Okay, we're gonna continue on this topic. I just want to tell the listeners, whoever doesn't know. So the protests in Serbia started last Tuesday, which should be July 7th, and they started after Vucic announced that on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday there's going to be a lockdown with all the people staying indoors 24 hours on Saturday, Sunday, half the day on Friday, starting at 6 p.m., and then until 6 a.m. on Monday. And why was this? Because of the coronavirus. We actually had super, super low numbers compared to most of Europe starting off. Then when the situation got better, we're one of the most, how would I say, liberative countries.
Least restrictive.
Right. We opened up everything. Nowhere were there sport games with fans. We had sport games with fans. Clubs were opening up. People were walking around. When you came, you were shocked by how little people actually cared about the virus. Nobody was wearing masks.
Yeah, I said if I didn't have a telephone to go on the internet, I wouldn't necessarily know coronavirus is a thing. It was like old Belgrade as normal.
Right. So we went from total lockdown when in the U.S. you guys were advised not to go outside. Okay, businesses were closing up and stuff. But we actually, for multiple days of the week, we would have lockdown where you couldn't leave your apartment at all. Then other times you would have it for half the day. After 5, you couldn't go outside. Stuff like that for 2 months. And it was tough, but I feel like people were like, okay, we have this virus. We don't know how bad it is. We'll stay indoors. And it was very good for the most part. Then, right after Vucic announced the elections, some month and a half after he took down restrictions, then after the elections, we found out that he was lying about the COVID-19 cases in Serbia. They were a lot higher than they were saying. There was a lot of people dying in Novi Pazar and in Belgrade, and actually at hospitals started filling up. But we didn't know any of it because they were falsifying the numbers. They weren't giving us the real numbers. So it was him saying that we're not going to be able to go outside was just like the last drop that filled the glass, that overflowed the glass. Because after that, people were like, okay, fuck this guy. What is he doing? He's been a dictator with a lot of stuff that he's been doing and telling people. But this was like the last drop. People were like, okay, I'm not going to have any of this. People went outside on Tuesday, got pepper gassed. What do you guys call it?
Tear gas.
Tear gas.
There's pepper spray and tear
Pepper
gas.
spray and tear gas. They got tear gassed heavily on Tuesday. There was police brutality all over, unnecessarily. Then we went on Wednesday. You'll talk about that experience, but there was even more cops, more violence, and people were saying, okay, I think that Vucic is actually hiring people to like the ultra fans to attack the government buildings to cause havoc, so police would attack normal civilians. Now people have been in jail for 48 hours. Some people have been thrown in jail for 30, 60 days because they just protested. because they quote unquote fought the police. But we saw so many videos, and I believe you saw them too, where people were unnecessarily beaten and attacked all over. There was a video after the first night of 3 kids sitting on a bench drinking beer. When I say kids, I mean like 18 to 20-year-olds drinking beer, sitting on a bench, and cops came in and brutally beat them up for no reason. They even had their hands up. Nothing happened. And then we went on Wednesday. Why don't you talk a little bit about that experience?
Okay. So we went with me and you and then 2 other American people. And we got there relatively early. I mean, it was full, but it was early in the night, still light out. And relatively packed right in front of the National Parliament building. And it was pretty much everyone there was peaceful. I mean, some people at the front were like throwing firecrackers at the police and stuff like that. And then it seemed like instead of actually trying, to allow the protest to, maybe quell like what's going on front, they're just like, no, we're just gonna throw tear gas everywhere and just clear everything out, like without that big of a reason. Like we just don't want to see this happening. Like it didn't seem. Generally, I feel like you should resort to that if you really need to like protect the cops or protect the building or whatever. But it seems like they were just resorting to it to prevent people's right to protest. And then we weren't directly hit by tear gas, but eventually, we saw people running away and coughing, and their eyes were all red, and we're like, oh, like it didn't seem like we were in the range of it, but then eventually we were hit by it as well. It all kind of hit us like at the same time, more or less. And that was my first experience being tear gassed. Would not recommend people to, or at least to take it more seriously than we did. I guess. I mean, we were fine, but it was. And then we got hit by that. They kind of broke up all the groups into disparate parts, so that there wasn't a real large group that could cause havoc, and then continue to really throw the tear gas everywhere, all across the city center. And then it worked effectively, but
a lot of people left.
Yeah, a lot of people left, and after a while too, we ended up leaving.
Okay, then I want to talk about more about this and more what happened the next day. But why don't you just tell, because this is controversial too. My dad got tear gassed on Tuesday, and he stayed up Tuesday night, he said, until 4 a.m. coughing, and then he actually threw up. And he saw online that people are saying the tear gas was 30 years old, it was expired, and it wasn't, I don't know how to call it, good quality, because it had bad side effects that tear gas shouldn't have.
Right.
Like people coughing longer and throwing up the night after. And then I remember we were listening to my dad saying this, and you said right before we went to bed, one of us is going to get up at like 3 a.m. and go to the bathroom. So then, why don't you tell the people what happened?
Yeah, so, I mean, when we initially got hit by the tear gas, after 5 or so minutes, roughly more or less you recovered from it. And then, we came back here after the protest, and I went to bed, no symptoms, felt good or whatever, but then, 3 a.m., for whatever reason, it's clear. I mean, it was too much of a coincidence for this to happen 12 hours or so after we were tear gassed. And I mean, your dad had issues, I had issues.
Why don't you describe how it looked for you when you went to the bathroom? What happened?
So I mean, I rushed up to the bathroom and then had a severe bloody nose. I don't know if, I mean, considering that it affects your sinuses and your eyes and whatever, it seemed to have a clear effect. And then beyond that, I mean, I don't know, but I mean, it seemed like I've heard, I told my parents that I got tear gassed, etc., and then my dad was talking about it on Facebook, and people were like, "Oh, it's no big deal. You just, you cry a little bit. You know, it stings your eyes. But then, I mean, considering we've heard other reports, what happened to me and what happened to your dad,
But why don't you?
it's almost certainly, you know,
So
there's something additionally
you
in it.
didn't have the same thing where you threw up like my dad did, but
the
exact
thing.
like thing that you felt.
Yeah.
What happened?
Yeah,
What,
so that was very weird. It's hard to explain. So it was right after I got the bloody nose, and I started to feel like I was gonna faint. I fainted like 4 or 5 times in my life, so I know when I'm very close. So I ended up laying down on the ground, and then I kind of got past it. You know, I was still feeling pretty bad, and then I kind of sat up, and then almost like I had this weird, very very weird experience that was very emotionally, you know, mentally and physically draining, where kind of I kind of got stuck in like a certain, you know, just like it just happened all of a sudden, and then my thoughts kept racing, you know, a million miles an hour. Like it was like I had an entire day's worth of thoughts in like 20 seconds, and then I could not speak because I had like the urge in my head to get your attention or whatever, that something was wrong, but I could not speak. I could not move, and it was just like crazy for like 30 seconds, and then it just like stopped. And it was like almost like I had some type of seizure or something. I know sometimes I was reading about it after, sometimes you get passed out, but there's other times if it's more mild, you'll stay awake. And it seems similar to what they're talking about, but I don't know, that's never happened to me in my life. And considering that happened the night right after protesting and getting hit by tear gas, it would be a humongous coincidence for that not to be correlated.
right. It was
crazy.
scary because I heard you like coughing, and then I went to see you, and you were laying on the ground, and I just said, "Are you okay? Do you need help?" And you said, "Yeah, I'm fine." And that was after.
That was right. That was probably, yeah. Like I was dazed after that, and then yeah, it was soon after that you asked that question.
Okay.
But yeah, it was crazy.
And then the next day, for obvious reasons, you decided to stay in and relax a little bit. And I went, and that was the first day that everyone was wearing white shirts, and it was a peaceful protest. And everyone was wearing white shirts and sitting down. So the hooligans, the people that got paid to attack the government building, would stand out. So anyone that tried to cause any violence or attack the building got shouted at, sit down, we want peaceful protest, this and that. And we sat there for 4 or 5 hours. I thought it was really good. I didn't think personally violent or non-violent protests would do anything. But I was more for just us showing that we're not happy, but not doing what you guys were doing in like Minneapolis, where you said you're gonna start working there in September, and you're not happy with how the protests were handled over there because they destroyed the city, even buildings that had nothing to do with.
Right. The biggest thing is the people they were, you know, theoretically protesting for Black Lives. You know, by doing what they did, they've actually, you know, overall hurt the people they're actually trying to, you know, stand up for. It's like counterintuitive.
Right. So I was all for sitting down, showcasing that we're not happy, but not actually getting into fights with police. There was no like cars destroyed like there was in the U.S. No buildings burnt. No businesses getting destroyed. Yeah, no. They were just the people that were attacking. They were just attacking the government building. So they said, okay, after day 3, they were like, obviously Vucic is paying some people, a small group of people, to start these fights, and then the police attacked everyone. We both saw some crazy videos on social media of police just destroying civilians, like beating them up to a point where I'm like, are these people okay? Or are they going to end up in hospital? What's going to happen?
It seemed even worse than the U.S. In certain instances with the cops. It seemed like if the cops really wanted to beat you, like they could kind of do it without, you know, justification.
Right.
There's bad clips in the U.S. too, but a couple of the Serbian ones were really shocking.
Okay, and then so that was when I went. That was Thursday. Uh, Friday I went just for a little while, and then Saturday we went together. There is less people showing up already. I feel like that's a mixture of people being disappointed with the protest and also people being scared for their security and even their lives. Like nobody died, but a lot of people got injured. Less people showed up. We showed up, stayed hour and a half, 2 hours maybe.
Yeah.
And then we decided let's go get pizza and come back.
Yep.
And on our way over to the pizza place, I saw 10 to 15 kids, younger people. They all seemed below like 30.
Early 20s.
Early 20s, yeah, maybe some teens. All standing next to the wall and police in front of them. And then they stopped the two of us that were also in that age bracket. And we went to a lake here in Serbia before that, went swimming. So I had my towel over my shoulder, I had a backpack on, and we had swim trunks on. So he said, where are you guys going? Were you at the pool? And I said, yes, Ada, blah, blah, blah. He noticed you didn't speak Serbian. He was kind of a douche to us. He was not very nice at all. But what happened then was he let us go, but he said, I don't know, you didn't pick this up probably, but he said, be careful where you're going tonight. Don't make any dumb decisions.
Okay.
And then when we went to the pizza place, we saw other cops stop another group of 3 people that were like our age, around their 20s, maybe a little bit younger. And it seems like they were stopping all the young people and asking them questions and making it harder for them to leave or go back to the protest, it seemed like. How was that experience? Were you scared when that cop stopped us?
Yeah.
He wasn't very like polite and welcoming.
Certainly not, no. I mean, cops in general mostly aren't like that. But yeah, well, I didn't have my passport or any form of identification on me. So at the bare minimum, I was nervous that I was be fined or something, which would have been whatever. But then also, who knows, given that we were walking away from the vicinity of the protest, what they were going to do. Were they all going to round us up and bring us to the police station? I don't know, Serbian, I've never been in that. So
right, there was 10 to 15 people next to the wall.
Yeah, who knows if they were going to just keep us on the wall.
Right. Because they did stop all those kids and they searched us. They went through my whole backpack, looked through every pocket to probably see if I wasn't carrying anything that would be used in violent terms at the protest. Okay. And then we kind of stopped going, especially because I don't know. At that point, I saw that they were stopping people, and a lot of people went to jail for 30 to 60 days, which means they're going to be in jail for another 20-something days for really just participating in the protest.
Well, also the last protest we went to was very broken up. It was unclear what the goals were.
Right. Some people were saying it was about Kosovo. Then other people were saying save the churches in Montenegro. Then some other people were complaining about a park in the city getting torn down for apartment buildings. It wasn't very.
It was just like it's a community town hall. Come in and voice your concern. There was no clear objective.
Right. And then I kind of stopped going. Day one. I wasn't. One of my friends said, revolution's coming. I was like, no, it's not. This dude, because of specific reasons, I don't think he's gonna back down until the Kosovo situation turns out, the way they want it to be. He's gonna give it up, and then he might get, assassinated. He might just not be in power anymore. We'll see. But yeah, that's my opinion. So I was never really optimistic about the whole protest. I felt like I did my part last week. We'll see how the protests continue. I might go back. Um, but yeah, thank you for coming, and thanks to the other two Americans for coming. A lot of even my friend said, like our friends from high school didn't go to the protest, and you came.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I I feel a connection to the country, even though I wasn't born here, etc. But you know, I'm definitely there to come support. I wish more people who lived here showed up, because I think if you got a vast majority of Serbians to care about the stuff that's happening in terms of like taking action against it, that you could actually have the revolution you're talking about. But,
Okay. Do you understand why people didn't go, or are you confused?
I mean, I think there's a lot of reasons. Were there people that were against the protests that weren't going?
I mean, the small the minority that's for Vucic,
Right,
obviously.
right, right.
Um,
I think maybe if something even worse happens, maybe we'll push people to come. But yeah, I think it's a lot of apathy, complacency. Like, I'm fine. I'm not gonna like. It's one thing to
and
complain about it, but it's one thing to fight against it.
and the first year you came was 2016, 4 years ago,
Yes.
and you were hearing people chanting "Vucic sucks" and all this back then,
Right.
and that was happening even before you came. Just so you know, but you know that. So this is an ongoing thing that people are not happy with this dictator that we have. But you brought up a point, I don't know when, maybe last week, when you said, if I didn't know any of the stuff that you told me that I read in the independent media, that's very few here. Most people, most media companies, most newspapers are controlled by Vucic. You would feel like it's fine here. Like there's no like authoritarian regime
Yeah. I
in
guess
power.
in a
'Cause
daily basis, it doesn't bleed itself out. People in America or whatever, they're not used to authoritarian regime, but even here, like, it clearly is. But maybe you can go your day to day life without noticing it if you're not keeping up with what's going on.
Right.
And just I've seen videos of Vucic, and if I don't know what he's saying, he seems to be fine. He looks fine, whatever that means, etc. And they're building the Belgrade waterfront, which looks super cool, like, etc. But there's a lot more behind that. But yeah, on the surface, it's not clearly a repressive, unfair, totalitarian regime. So yeah.
Do you think? I don't know. I feel like all the European powers that have an impact on Serbia, like the more developed countries in the EU, still see this, but they just don't care. Like, I feel like it's impossible that he brainwashed everyone in Serbia and then everyone from outside Serbia in the EU that, okay, I'm actually great for Serbia. People can vote for whoever. Just so we have a a more clear picture. So the results of the elections came in 2-3 weeks ago. I want to say 3 weeks ago, probably. Vucic's party got 60% of the votes. The second party that was in favor of Vucic, but wasn't his specific party, got 12%. And then the next party that was actually independent, did not care about Vucic at all, got 5%. 5, 6, 7%. So out of all the votes, you had 7% against Vucic, was the highest number. And then they actually said people were going to boycott it. They're not going to go because the elections weren't fair. Because you could only hear about Vucic on TV. You could only hear about Vucic in the newspaper. It was all positive stuff. I don't know if you paid attention. Most of the billboards and stuff were saying for our kids, which is...
yeah, I don't think I saw any billboards against Vucic at all.
Right. Or for other parties.
Right, for other parties.
Right. And, I mean, it doesn't have anything to do with anything, but actually, Hitler had the same motto for one of his campaigns, for our kids. And then people were actually, when he talks sometimes, they put Hitler's antics next to him, like a video next to the video, and you see similarities even with hand gestures and intensity, and sometimes even with the stuff they're saying, which is insane. Where was I going?
Yeah, but I think in terms of, the great powers in Western Europe and U.S., they're all aware of what's going on, but, pretty much every country acts very selfishly, so, they'll only care about the Serbian situation when it makes sense for them to care. They're not going to be like, oh, we want the Serbian people to live, a prosperous life, etc. I don't know. If for whatever reason it impacts
benefits them,
then they'll get involved, but otherwise.
Even my friend was telling you yesterday how when people vote here, a lot of people that worked in government companies and even outside of the government companies, a lot of them have to go vote, and then they have to take a picture of their ID next to the ballot with Vucic's name circled, and then send it to a group so they don't get fired.
Right. That's crazy.
They found out.
I couldn't imagine that ever happening in the U.S. I mean,
they found out that I don't know how many where they called where you vote
like the voter booths.
No, polling places. They found I don't know what the exact number was, but I think over 50 polling places had illegal activity, meaning something wasn't right. Either people could take pictures, invalid IDs. We had situations 4 years ago, I believe, where they had the dead people vote, which meant someone was dead, took their ID, went to vote with a dead person's ID.
Right.
And this all happens, and they're like, okay, just cancel the dead people's votes. It's fine.
Yeah, it's crazy.
So, what are kind of your opinions? Because as you said, you read the Serbian newspapers, you watch some of the television here, the Independent. We don't watch Pink or Happy or any of these TV stations that Vucic controls. And you hear what me and my friends, have you met anyone in Serbia that supports this dude?
No. You tell me and other people tell me, their older relatives maybe support it, but anyone I've talked to, no, I do not know anyone who supports Vucic.
And for example, I don't know, even when he ran for president, he got 60-something% of the votes. Hillary Trump was 50-50.
Yeah, most U.S. elections are 50.
And people that have voted for Hillary and Trump.
Right.
That have openly told you, at least. Right?
And more than, a number of people on both sides, of course.
And we literally know, my grandma, this person's grandma, and then maybe a friend of this friend's friend voted for him. It's not a majority.
Right.
But we also live in Belgrade, which is another factor. I know in smaller towns, people have even less access to the truth. Because here people use a lot of Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, etc. So they get more information versus in some small village that doesn't even have an internet connection in Serbia, they're going to be like, oh, Vucic is God.
Right.
And one thing that I think is true, I want to get your opinion on this. Do you think it has anything to do with the fact that, let's say my grandma, she's 70-something. When Yugoslavia broke apart, she was 40-something. So still fairly young. And so she grew up in Yugoslavia when Tito was God. Tito equals God. Whatever Tito says, that's how it is. If you defy Tito, he takes you to an island and you're a prisoner. And you're supposed to listen to this one man that's almighty, says the truth all the time, is the best. Might sound like communism, super similar to that. We had socialism in Yugoslavia. Do you think that has an impact on why especially older people like Vucic?
I think 100% it does. I think, a lot of the countries over here have experimented with, having communism, having a dictator, etc. And I think that if you grow up on that, that you get used to that. In the U.S., we're not at all used to having one guy who calls the shots and everything. So if that started to happen, people would push back against that. But if you grow up in that, that's just like what you see government as, unless maybe you've, traveled a lot around the world and seen a lot of different things. I think even the younger generation here, obviously they're against Vucic, but they kind of just are used to a supreme ruler, corruption, etc. Whereas that's relatively foreign. It's a lot more common here than in the United States. So if you grow up in that, then things don't seem as harsh.
Can you explain to, let's say, I'm sure some of our friends from college are going to listen to this. Can you explain what it means for, you say it's openly corrupted here. How do you know it's openly corrupted here?
I mean, I guess, what people talk about stuff that happens, and the thing is that it's just talked about so nonchalantly. Like, it's not this big scandal. It's just like, oh yeah, they paid off the refs to rig a game. Whereas if that happened in the U.S., like, that'd be national news for a week. This is just like, oh, it's another game. Or like, in politics, or in so many different facets of society at large, that it's just like what happens. Like, or the cops, like, oh, you don't want to get a DUI? Oh, okay, give the cop $50. Like, I've never ever heard of anyone doing that in the U.S. Like,
super common here. Super common.
Right, and it's just,
I even heard, you've met some of my coworkers. One of my coworkers said he was coming back from a wedding, and he drank a lot, and the cop stopped him. And the cop didn't even have to take the breathalyzer out. He was like, I can tell that you drank a lot. And he said, yeah, but I went to a wedding, and there's a lot of British people there. So I'll point you to where the wedding is. You can go and stop people there, and you can get a lot more money from them than you can from me. The cop said, great. Do that. You're off. Go.
And I think that culture of, corruption just being a thing of everyday life, then, that has a lot of bad repercussions. I think that if people start to think that that's abnormal and that's not something that should be allowed, you got to fight it on the smaller level if you want to, have the whole system be less corrupt. And I think, that causes a lot of the problems. It's hard to get out of a corrupt system. Like, how do you break down a corrupt system and then build something up great from this?
Just like my dad said,
take
so one corrupt cop to jail, take another corrupt cop in jail, then all the other cops are going to be like, oh shit, they're taking off.
The problem also is that to take the corrupt cops to jail, you have to have someone who's not corrupt to enforce that policy. And if the entire system's corrupt, I mean, I'm sure it can be done, but it seems hard to overcome when every, little facet of society has some level of corruption.
And just so listeners from abroad know, like, 10 days ago we celebrate 4th of July, and there was a lot of Americans, and if you're independent of the system here, like they all have online jobs, working for companies outside of Serbia, working with some Serbian people, some of them freelance and do it on their own. And they have an amazing time here. They like it, not too expensive, a lot cheaper than the U.S., a lot cheaper than some countries in Western Europe, etc. So they really enjoy it. They say, well, the people are nice, the food's good, not too expensive, etc. But if you're dependent on working in a factory that's owned by the government, you gotta be pro Vucic, otherwise you lose your job.
Right. Yeah. I mean, yeah. If you have the a good financial opportunity in Serbia, then the country's great. But the vast majority of Serbian citizens don't have that luxury. But for me to come here, like, Serbia's not a name brand country, so to speak, but it's a great country. So I wish that the people that I speak with, that I'm friends with, had the same kind of economic opportunities, because then I think that a lot of people would like their country a lot more. But it's it's hard to say positive things about the country you're born in when you see levels of corruption and no clear path forward to a prosperous life.
We'll talk more about your thoughts on Serbia in the next podcast. We're gonna stay away from politics as much as possible in the next podcast. But why don't you just tell listeners a little bit about what kind of interest you have in the history for not just Serbia but this whole area, and some of your readings that you've done, and why were you even interested in all that?
Yeah, I think, first and foremost, generally, I'm just like a very curious person. So if I kind of, get interested in a general, area or topic, etc., then I'll have a desire to explore it further. But, when I come here and I visit, it makes me want to like understand things more than just having a surface level tourist view of things. Like I want to learn the language, I want to understand the history. So yeah, I've read 2 books now on the Balkan area in general, which also covers, Serbian history in parts of the book. And then, I'll continue to, read more on the subject and in more particular on the Serbian side of things. And now I've started to read some kind of, suggested Balkan literature. And, I think the history is good to know the facts of the situation, to understand maybe how they got to the present and how things are kind of shaped now. And then also, reading the literature kind of lets you peer into like the mindsets of the people and how they see life. So I think, I've taken an interest to Serbia in particular and the area in general, and I think, doing those things are important.
Now let's just say that you wanted to travel around the area, but because of the COVID situation, you couldn't do that this year. One day in the future, in a few years.
Yeah, certainly. There's tons of places I want to see in the Balkans. And, I've seen a little bit, but there's a lot more to explore.
And you've seen a few ex-Yugoslavian countries. We went to Croatia and Slovenia last year. You were amazed with Slovenia?
Slovenia is unbelievable. Well, I was only there for a day, but that's just to get a little taste of it. I need at least 10 more days in Slovenia, but I couldn't believe
that we were one country 30 years ago.
Man, yeah, it's crazy how well they take care of their country. It's super cool, and it seems like they have a bunch of natural beauty, things to see.
And you're not just saying this because you're a Doncic fan, right? Luka Doncic fan.
Maybe it has an influence on me.
No, but then we went to Croatia and we saw a fight on the train because 2 people bumped into each other on their way out. And when we got off, you asked me what happened, and when I told you, what was your reaction like?
I can't believe some of the things that I see in Croatia, Serbia. People are crazy. Yeah, it's very amusing, very very high.
Yeah, but it's just funny. I remember your specific words. You went, "You're all the same."
Oh yes, true. Yes, yeah. Serbia and Croatian people, really, you guys need to make up because come on, you're all the same.
So funny. Okay.
Deep down, Serbian people know that, and Croats know that.
Do you have anything you want to add before we switch the second part of this podcast where we only talk about life in Serbia, nothing about politics?
I think we hit it. I hope that maybe things that develop in the future will push Serbians to get out and actually start a revolution. And it was nice to see what happened, but there needs to be more. There needs to be more of a coalition.
So, are you going to be in Serbia for a 5th time?
Certainly. Definitely not again until the coronavirus situation blows over, but death is pretty much the only thing that will keep me from returning to this place. I don't know the time frame, but it will happen, hopefully relatively soon.
Okay. We'll talk more about why you like it and why you keep coming back in the next podcast. Follow us there, guys, and have a great day.